You are standing where the harbor of Alexandria once began, where ships from every corner of the known world would have come to rest, their sails furled, their holds heavy with grain and spice and papyrus. This is the city that fed an empire, the city that gathered the world's knowledge into one place, the city that burned or faded, or sank beneath the waves depending on which story you believe. Tonight we will walk through that city as it was, not as ruin or legend, but as a living, breathing place, crowded and noisy and filled with light. We will stand in its library, walk its streets, watch its lighthouse burn against the night. We will meet its scholars and its sailors, its queens and its conquerors, and we will witness, gently, the slow unraveling of a dream that was never meant to last forever. The modern Alexandria behind you is a city of nearly 5 million people, a sprawling metropolis of concrete and traffic and the constant noise of urban life. But if you could strip away the centuries, layer by layer, peeling back the Ottoman and the medieval and the Byzantine and the Roman, you would find beneath it all the ghost of another city entirely. A city of marble and limestone, of wide colonnaded streets and gardens filled with fountains. A city where the air smelled not of car exhaust, but of incense and baking bread and the sea. A city where the tallest structure was not a modern apartment block, but a lighthouse so magnificent that it became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. That city is gone now, most of it drowned or buried, but its memory persists in the fragments that remain and in the stories that have been told and retold for 2,000 years. And so tonight, we will tell those stories again. We will walk through Alexandria as it might have appeared to a visitor arriving in the 3rd century before the Common Era, when the city was young and the library was just beginning to fill its shelves, and the future seemed limitless. We will linger in the markets and the temples, in the palace and the docks. We will meet the people who lived and worked here, from the greatest scholars to the humblest laborers. And we will try, as best we can, to understand what it felt like to be part of this extraordinary experiment, this city built on the premise that knowledge could change the world. So settle in now, let the noise of the modern world fade away, and let us travel back across 2,000 years to a city that no longer exists except in memory and in the deep silent waters of the harbor where you now stand. The story of Alexandria begins not with a city, but with a man and a vision. It is the year 331 before the Common Era, and Alexander of Macedon, 25 years old, and already master of Greece and Persia, has arrived in Egypt. He has crossed deserts and mountains, fought battles that seemed impossible to win, and now he stands on the edge of the Nile Delta, looking out at the sea. The journey that brought him here has been extraordinary. Just 3 years earlier, he departed from Macedonia with an army of fewer than 40,000 men, intent on conquering the Persian Empire, the greatest power the world had ever known. He crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, won a series of stunning victories against Persian forces that outnumbered him by staggering margins, and marched through Anatolia and down the Levantine coast, liberating cities and accepting the surrender of satraps, who realized that the old order was finished. When he reached Egypt, the Persian satrap handed over the province without a fight, and the Egyptian priests, who had chafed under Persian rule for nearly 200 years, welcomed Alexander as a liberator. Egypt has welcomed him, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The Persian Empire, which had ruled this ancient land for 2 centuries, has fallen, and the Egyptian priests, pragmatic and wise, have crowned Alexander as pharaoh. He is now, at least in name, a god. But Alexander is not interested in ruling from Memphis or Thebes, the old capitals deep in the desert, cities whose histories stretch back thousands of years to the age of the pyramids. He is interested in the future, and the future, he believes, lies at the meeting place of worlds, where the Mediterranean touches the land of the Nile. He has seen the great port cities of the Greek world, places like Miletus and Ephesus, and he understands the power that comes from controlling trade routes, from being the place where goods and ideas flow in and out. And so he chooses a site, a narrow strip of land between the sea and a shallow lake called Marotus, sheltered by a small island called Pharos. The site is not empty. There is a small Egyptian fishing village here, a collection of mud brick houses clustered around a freshwater spring, but it is nothing compared to what Alexander envisions. It is not an obvious choice. The land is sandy, exposed, difficult. There are no natural resources here, no quarries of stone, no forests for timber. Everything will have to be imported. But Alexander sees what others do not. He sees a harbor protected by the island, deep enough for the great ships of the age. He sees a city that will face both east and west, a bridge between Greece and Egypt, between Europe and Africa and Asia. He sees a place where the rivers of the world's trade will converge, where knowledge and grain and gold will flow in and out like the tides. He sees, in short, a city that will bear his name and outlast him, a monument not in stone but in human achievement. To design this city, Alexander calls upon an architect named Dinocrates of Rhodes, a man known for his grand and daring visions. Dinocrates had once proposed to Alexander that he carve the entire Mount Athos into a statue of the king, a project so audacious that even Alexander, who was not known for modesty, declined it. But this project, the founding of a new city, is one that Dinocrates embraces with enthusiasm. Together they walk the site. The sun is high and merciless. The sand is hot beneath their feet, and the wind blows constantly from the north, carrying with it the salt spray of the sea. There are no buildings here, no temples, no monuments, only the wind and the sea and the flat, patient land. Dinocrates takes a long stick and begins to draw in the sand. He lays out a grid, straight and rational, a plan borrowed from the Greek ideal of order, the same kind of urban planning that had been used to lay out cities like Miletus after they were destroyed and rebuilt. The streets will run perpendicular, wide enough for chariots and carts. The main avenue, the Canopic Way, will stretch from the Gate of the Sun in the east to the Gate of the Moon in the west, a road so broad that 2 wagons can pass each other with room to spare. Modern estimates suggest this avenue was nearly 100 feet wide, broader than almost any street in the ancient world. The city will be divided into quarters, each with its own character, its own temples and markets. There will be a Greek quarter, and an Egyptian quarter, and a Jewish quarter, a physical manifestation of the cosmopolitan ideal that will define Alexandria for the next 1,000 years. And at the heart, where the land meets the sea, there will be a palace, a place for kings, a seat of power that will rival anything in Athens or Babylon. Alexander listens, nods, approves. He takes a handful of barley flour, the only white powder available at the moment, and pours it along the lines Dinocrates has drawn, marking the boundaries of streets and walls. The flour glows white against the dark sand, and the shape of the future city begins to emerge. A geometric dream imposed on the formless land. Almost immediately, flocks of seabirds descend, drawn by the scent of grain, and devour the flour, erasing the lines as quickly as they were drawn. The moment is witnessed by Alexander's retinue, and there is a pause, a hesitation, as everyone wonders if this is a bad omen. But the soothsayers, those professional interpreters of signs who accompany every Greek army, declare that the omens are good. The city will be prosperous, they say. It will feed multitudes. The birds eating the grain are a sign that Alexandria will draw people from every corner of the earth, that it will be a city of abundance. And so the first stones are laid, not in a day or a year, but slowly, carefully, with the knowledge that this is not just a city but a statement, a declaration that the world has changed and that here, on this narrow strip of sand, something new is being born. Alexander himself will never see the city completed. He will leave Egypt shortly after the founding ceremony, marching east to continue his conquest of Persia. He will push all the way to India, to the banks of the Indus River, before his exhausted soldiers finally refuse to go any further. He will die in Babylon in 323 BCE, at the age of 32, possibly of malaria, possibly of poison, possibly simply worn out by a decade of constant warfare and the excesses of his own ambition. Within a decade, he will be dead, his empire divided among his generals in a series of brutal wars that will reshape the entire eastern Mediterranean. But his body will be brought back to Egypt and entombed in Alexandria, the city that bears his name. For centuries, his tomb will be one of the great pilgrimage sites of the ancient world, visited by Julius Caesar and Augustus and countless others who come to pay their respects to the man who changed the world. The exact location of the tomb is now lost, buried somewhere beneath the modern city, one of archaeology's great unsolved mysteries. But the vision will endure. Under the rule of Ptolemy, one of Alexander's closest companions and now the king of Egypt, Alexandria will grow from a dream drawn in sand into the greatest city of the ancient world. Ptolemy is a shrewd and pragmatic man, a general who has survived the wars of the successors by being careful and patient. He has watched as other generals burned themselves out in attempts to reunite Alexander's empire, and he has concluded that the future lies not in endless conquest, but in consolidation, in building a strong, wealthy kingdom that can defend itself and prosper. And he understands what Alexander understood, that power in this new age will not come only from armies, but from knowledge, from trade, from the control of ideas and goods. Ptolemy has also taken a crucial step that will define his dynasty. He has stolen Alexander's body. According to the ancient sources, Alexander's funeral cortege was being transported back to Macedonia when Ptolemy intercepted it in Syria and brought it to Egypt instead. It was a bold and sacrilegious act, but it gave Ptolemy an immense source of legitimacy. To possess the body of Alexander was to claim, in a sense, to be his true heir. And so Ptolemy begins to build, not just palaces and walls, but institutions. He founds a library, a place where the world's learning can be gathered and preserved. The idea is not entirely new. There were libraries in the ancient Near East, collections of clay tablets in places like Nineveh and Babylon. But those were royal archives, collections of bureaucratic records and religious texts, closed to all but a select few. The Library of Alexandria will be something different, a universal library, a place where every text ever written, in every language on every subject, will be collected and made available to scholars.
It is an audacious vision.
Perhaps an impossible one, but Ptolemy commits to it fully. He establishes a museum, a sanctuary for scholars, a place where they can live and work and think without the distractions of war or politics. The Greek word Mausion means seat of the Muses, the 9 goddesses who preside over the arts and sciences, and the Mausion of Alexandria will be their earthly temple. He invites the greatest minds of the age to come to Alexandria, offering them salaries, housing, freedom from taxation, and access to resources no other city can provide. The terms are generous almost beyond belief. Scholars receive not just a stipend, but free meals in a common dining hall, servants to attend to their needs, and exemption from the taxes that burden ordinary citizens. And they come from Athens and Rhodes, from Cyrene and Babylon, from the far edges of the known world. They come, mathematicians and astronomers, physicians and poets, philosophers and engineers. They come because Alexandria is not just a city, it is a promise. A promise that here, at the edge of the sea, knowledge is sacred, and the pursuit of truth is the highest calling. Among the first to arrive is Demetrius of Phalerum, an Athenian philosopher and statesman who will serve as the first head of the library. Under his guidance, the work of acquisition begins. Agents are dispatched to the great cities of the Greek world with instructions to purchase or copy every book they can find. Ships arriving in the harbor are searched, and if they carry any scrolls, those scrolls are confiscated, taken to the library to be copied. The copies are returned to the owners. The originals remain in Alexandria. Imagine now that you are one of those scholars, arriving in Alexandria for the first time. You have traveled for weeks, perhaps months, by ship and by road, and now, as your vessel approaches the harbor, you see it rising before you like a vision. The voyage has been long and not without its dangers. You have sailed from Piraeus, the port of Athens, stopping at islands along the way to take on fresh water and provisions. You have weathered storms in the open Aegean, huddled below deck while the ship pitched and rolled, listening to the sailors above you shouting to each other in voices hoarse with effort. You have passed through the narrow waters between Crete and the African coast, where pirates are known to lurk, waiting for unwary merchantmen. But your ship is part of a convoy, sailing under the protection of Ptolemaic warships, and you have arrived safely. The first thing you notice is the lighthouse. It stands on the island of Pharos, taller than any building you have ever seen, a tower of white marble and limestone rising 300 feet into the sky. It is built in 3 tiers, each one narrower than the one below, creating a stepped pyramid effect. The bottom tier is square, the middle tier octagonal, the top tier cylindrical. At its summit, a fire burns, and at night, they say, a great bronze mirror reflects that fire out across the water, visible for 30 miles in every direction. It is a wonder, a marvel, a statement of human ambition made solid and permanent. The lighthouse was completed only a few decades ago, during the reign of Ptolemy II, and it has already become the symbol of the city, an icon recognized throughout the Mediterranean world. Your ship glides past the lighthouse and into the great harbor, and now you see the city itself. The waterfront is lined with buildings, colonnades, temples, warehouses. The royal palace stretches along the eastern side of the harbor, a vast complex of buildings and gardens that occupies nearly a third of the entire city. The architecture is a blend of Greek and Egyptian styles, with Greek columns and pediments combined with Egyptian motifs, hieroglyphs carved into lintels, statues of gods with human bodies and animal heads. The effect is strange and beautiful, a visual representation of the cultural fusion that defines Alexandria. The air is filled with the cries of gulls and the shouts of sailors, the creak of rigging, the splash of oars. The smells are overwhelming: salt and fish, tar and rope, the sweet, smoky scent of incense from a nearby temple, the earthy richness of grain being unloaded from a ship just arrived from the Nile. The docks are crowded with people, a bewildering mix of races and languages. There are Egyptians in white linen kilts, Greeks in tunics and cloaks, dark-skinned Nubians from the south, Phoenicians with purple-dyed robes, Jews with their distinctive prayer shawls, all of them moving with purpose, loading and unloading cargo, haggling over prices, shouting instructions. You step onto the dock, and the stone is warm beneath your feet, heated by the Mediterranean sun. Around you the city hums with life. There are men speaking Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, Phoenician, languages you recognize, and languages you do not. There are sailors with sun-darkened skin and merchants in fine linen robes, slaves carrying bundles on their backs and officials with scrolls tucked under their arms, their expressions harried as they try to keep track of the endless flow of goods and people. This is Alexandria, and you have arrived. You make your way through the streets, following the directions you were given in your letter of invitation. The letter came months ago, delivered by a royal courier to your home in Athens, written on the finest papyrus and sealed with the royal seal of Ptolemy. It was an invitation to join the scholars of the Maushan, to contribute your expertise to the great project of gathering and preserving the world's knowledge. The terms were generous, almost unbelievable: a salary of 12 talents of silver per year, free housing within the Maushan complex, exemption from taxes, and access to the library and all its resources. You accepted immediately, of course. What scholar would not? The canopic way is as wide as you were told, paved with stone, lined on both sides with columns that cast long shadows in the afternoon light. The columns are made of granite, quarried far to the south in the deserts of Upper Egypt, and brought down the Nile on barges, a feat of engineering that speaks to the wealth and ambition of the Ptolemaic state. You pass markets where vendors sell figs and dates, honey and oil, fabrics dyed in colors you have never seen before, purples and crimsons and deep ocean blues. The purple dye you know comes from a tiny sea snail found along the Phoenician coast, and it is so expensive that only the wealthiest citizens can afford garments dyed with it. The crimsons come from an insect that lives on oak trees, and the blues from a plant called woad, cultivated in the fields of Egypt and Syria. You pass temples dedicated to gods both familiar and strange, Zeus and Hera, Isis and Serapis, a blending of Greek and Egyptian tradition that is uniquely Alexandrian. The Temple of Isis is particularly impressive, its entrance flanked by massive stone statues of the goddess in her traditional Egyptian form, wearing the throne-shaped crown that is her symbol. But inside, the rituals are conducted in Greek, and the prayers are addressed to a goddess who is both the ancient Egyptian mother goddess and a Hellenized deity of the sea and fertility. And then at last you reach your destination, the Mausoleum, the museum, the sanctuary of the muses. It is not a single building but a complex, a walled enclave near the palace, set back from the noise and bustle of the city. The walls are high, whitewashed, designed to keep out the distractions of the outside world and to create a space of calm and contemplation. You pass through a gate guarded by soldiers in the livery of the Ptolemaic court, and you enter a different world. Inside there are lecture halls and gardens, observatories and dissection rooms, living quarters for the scholars and their families. The gardens are filled with plants from all over the known world, brought here by travelers and traders and cultivated by gardeners who tend them with meticulous care. There are date palms from Arabia, olive trees from Greece, lotus flowers from the Nile, exotic flowering plants from India and Persia. The air is filled with the scent of jasmine and roses, and the sound of water trickling from fountains. The fountains are fed by an aqueduct that brings fresh water from Lake Maritis, and the water is cool and clean, a luxury in a city where much of the population relies on wells and cisterns. And at the center of the complex, the heart of it all, is the library. The building itself is massive, far larger than any library you have seen before. The entrance is through a portico supported by columns of polished marble, and above the entrance, carved in Greek letters, is an inscription: "The place of the cure of the soul." You step inside, and the world falls silent. The air is cool and dry, carefully maintained to preserve the scrolls. The Alexandrians have learned that papyrus, which is made from the pith of a plant that grows in the Nile Delta, is vulnerable to moisture and heat. Too much humidity, and the papyrus will rot. Too much heat, and it will become brittle and crumble. And so the library is designed with high ceilings to allow air to circulate, and the windows are positioned to admit light without letting in the direct heat of the sun. The light is soft, filtered through high windows covered with thin sheets of alabaster that glow with a warm honey-colored light. All around you, stretching into the shadows, are shelves, and on those shelves, rolled and labeled and catalogued with meticulous care, are the scrolls. Tens of thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands, they say, though no one knows the exact number. Some ancient sources claim that the library eventually held 700,000 scrolls, though modern scholars think this number is almost certainly an exaggeration. A more conservative estimate places the collection at somewhere between 40,000 and 400,000 scrolls at its peak. But even the lower estimate is staggering. This is the Great Library of Alexandria, and it contains, or will contain, the sum of human knowledge. Every book ever written, every poem, every medical treatise, every work of philosophy and history and mathematics, Homer and Hesiod, the great Greek poets, Herodotus and Thucydides, the historians, Plato and Aristotle, the philosophers, the medical writings of Hippocrates, the astronomical observations of the Babylonians, the sacred texts of the Jews, which are even now being translated from Hebrew into Greek in a project that will produce the Septuagint, the first translation of the Hebrew Bible, acquired by purchase, by copying, by royal decree. Ships arriving in the harbor are searched, and if they carry any books, those books are confiscated, copied, and the copies returned to their owners. The originals remain here, in the library, forever. You are assigned a small room, simple but sufficient, with a bed and a desk and a window that looks out over the gardens. The room is furnished with the basics: a wooden bed frame with a mattress stuffed with straw, a writing desk with a lamp and a supply of papyrus and ink, a shelf for your personal belongings, a chair. The walls are whitewashed, and the floor is paved with simple tiles. It is not luxurious, but it is comfortable, and it is yours for as long as you remain a member of the Mauschen. You are given a stipend, enough to live comfortably without worry. The stipend is paid monthly, in silver coins stamped with the image of Ptolemy on one side and the eagle of Zeus on the other. It is more money than you ever earned in Athens, where you supported yourself by tutoring the sons of wealthy families and by writing speeches for politicians. You are told that your only obligation is to study, to think, to contribute to the great project of understanding the world. There are no formal requirements, no schedule you must keep, no quotas you must meet. You are free to pursue your research in whatever direction your curiosity takes you. And so you begin. Each morning you wake to the sound of birdsong and the distant murmur of the city beyond the walls. You take your breakfast in the common hall, a large room with long tables where the scholars gather to eat and talk. The food is simple but plentiful: bread and cheese, olives and figs, honey and wine. The bread is fresh, baked each morning in the Mauschen's own kitchens, and the wine is watered in the Greek fashion, 3 parts water to 1 part wine, light and refreshing. You are surrounded by men whose names you know from their writings, men whose ideas have shaped your own thinking. You discuss geometry with Euclid, who is even now compiling his Elements, the foundational text that will define mathematics for centuries. Euclid is an older man, patient and methodical, with a gift for taking complex ideas and breaking them down into clear, logical steps. His Elements will eventually consist of 13 books, covering everything from basic geometry to number theory to solid geometry. It will be copied and recopied, translated into Arabic and Latin, and will remain the standard textbook of geometry until the 20th century. You debate the nature of the cosmos with Aristarchus of Samos, who has proposed controversially that the Earth moves around the Sun, not the other way around. Aristarchus is a bold thinker, willing to challenge the assumptions that almost everyone takes for granted. His heliocentric model will be rejected by most of his contemporaries, who find the idea that the Earth is moving absurd. After all, if the Earth were moving, wouldn't we feel it? Wouldn't there be a constant wind as the Earth rushed through space? It will be nearly 2,000 years before Copernicus will revive the idea and place the Sun at the center of the solar system. You watch Eratosthenes, the chief librarian, as he calculates the circumference of the earth using nothing but the angle of the sun's shadow in two different cities and a brilliant understanding of geometry. Eratosthenes has heard that in the city of Syene, far to the south, the sun at noon on the summer solstice shines directly down a deep well, meaning that it is directly overhead. But in Alexandria, on the same day at the same time, the sun casts a shadow, meaning that it is not directly overhead. By measuring the angle of the shadow in Alexandria and knowing the distance between the two cities, Eratosthenes can calculate the circumference of the earth. His answer is astonishingly accurate, within a few hundred miles of the true figure. It is a triumph of pure reason, a demonstration that the world can be understood through observation and mathematics. These are not abstract debates conducted in the safety of a classroom. This is the cutting edge of human knowledge, and you are part of it. In the afternoons, you work in the library, reading scrolls, taking notes, copying passages. The smell of papyrus is everywhere, a dry, faintly sweet scent that clings to your clothes and your hair. The scrolls are fragile, and you handle them with care, unrolling them slowly, your eyes moving across the columns of text, written in ink made from soot and water and gum. The ink is black and slightly glossy, and over time it fades to a dark brown. Some of the scrolls are ancient, copied from even older sources, their language archaic, their arguments strange and beautiful. You read a scroll that contains fragments of the pre-Socratic philosophers, men like Heraclitus and Parmenides, who lived centuries ago and whose writings survive only in quotations preserved by later authors. You read a medical text by Hippocrates, describing the symptoms and treatment of various diseases, written in a clear, observational style that is surprisingly modern. You read a work of natural history by Aristotle, cataloguing the animals of the Mediterranean world, describing their anatomy and behavior with meticulous detail. Others are new, written by scholars living here in Alexandria, works that will themselves become part of the great archive. The work is slow, meditative, almost sacred. You are not just reading, you are preserving. You are ensuring that what was known will not be forgotten. The library employs a staff of scribes whose sole job is to copy scrolls, producing multiple copies of important texts so that if one is damaged or lost, others will survive. The scribes work in a large room filled with desks, each one bent over a scroll, copying word by word, line by line. It is tedious work, but it is essential. Without the scribes, the library could not grow, could not fulfill its mission of preserving human knowledge. As the weeks and months pass, you begin to understand what Alexandria truly is. It is not just a city, or a library, or a collection of scholars. It is an idea. The idea that knowledge transcends borders, that truth belongs to no one nation or people, that the pursuit of understanding is the highest and most noble of human endeavors. This idea is embodied in the very design of the city, in the way it welcomes travelers from every land, in the way it blends cultures and traditions without erasing them. You see it in the streets, where a Greek philosopher might debate with an Egyptian priest, where a Jewish merchant might share a meal with a Phoenician sailor. The Jewish community in Alexandria is large and prosperous, numbering in the tens of thousands, and they have their own quarter of the city, their own synagogues and schools. The Ptolemies have granted them the right to live according to their own laws, to practice their religion freely, and many Jews have risen to positions of prominence in the government and the economy. It is in Alexandria that the Hebrew Bible will be translated into Greek, a monumental project that will take decades and will involve dozens of scholars. According to legend, Ptolemy II commissioned 72 Jewish scholars to produce the translation, and they worked independently, each producing an identical translation, a miracle that proved the divine inspiration of the text. The translation, known as the Septuagint, will become the standard version of the Bible for Greek-speaking Jews and later for Christians. You see it in the library, where the works of Homer sit beside the writings of Zoroaster, where the medical texts of Hippocrates are shelved next to the treatises of Indian physicians. This is cosmopolitanism in its purest form, the belief that the world is richer for its diversity, that every culture has something to teach, that no one holds a monopoly on wisdom. And yet even here, in this temple of learning, there are tensions. The Ptolemaic kings who fund the library and the museum are Greek, descendants of Macedonian conquerors, and they rule over a population that is predominantly Egyptian. The official language of the court and the library is Greek, and many of the native Egyptians, who speak Demotic and worship gods whose names are older than memory, feel excluded from the grand project unfolding in their own land. The Ptolemies present themselves as pharaohs, wearing the traditional crowns and participating in Egyptian religious rituals, but in private, in the palace and the Maushin, they are Greek through and through. They speak Greek, read Greek literature, worship Greek gods. The Egyptian temples continue to function, and the priests continue to perform their ancient rituals, but they are increasingly marginalized, their influence waning as the Greek culture of the court becomes dominant. There are moments of friction, small conflicts that hint at deeper divisions. Egyptian laborers work on the construction of the great buildings of Alexandria, but they are paid less than Greek workers and are often treated with contempt. Egyptian merchants are subject to higher taxes than their Greek counterparts. The native Egyptian religion, with its elaborate rituals and its pantheon of animal-headed gods, is viewed by many Greeks as primitive and superstitious. But for now, in this golden age, the tensions are manageable, held in check by the prosperity and prestige that Alexandria brings to all who live within its walls. The city is growing rapidly, swelling with immigrants from all over the Mediterranean. The population is already well over 100,000, making it one of the largest cities in the world, and it continues to grow. And what of the lighthouse, that towering symbol of the city's ambition? Imagine that you climb it one evening, making your way up the long spiral ramp that winds through the interior. The lighthouse is open to visitors, though a small fee is charged, the proceeds going to fund the maintenance of the structure and the salaries of the keepers who tend the fire. The ramp is wide enough for a donkey cart, because fuel for the fire must be hauled up to the top every day, and the walls are thick, cool to the touch even in the heat of the afternoon. As you ascend, the sounds of the city grow fainter, replaced by the whisper of the wind. The climb is long and tiring, and by the time you reach the first platform, where the square tier gives way to the octagonal tier, you are breathing hard. But you continue, driven by curiosity and by the promise of the view. The octagonal tier is decorated with statues of gods and heroes, larger than life, carved from marble and positioned in niches along the outer wall. As you climb higher, the wind grows stronger, and you can feel the structure swaying slightly, an unsettling sensation that reminds you just how high you are. Finally, you emerge at the top, onto a platform open to the sky, and the view takes your breath away. To the north, the Mediterranean stretches to the horizon, its surface glittering in the last light of the sun. The water is a deep, intense blue, flecked with white where the wind has kicked up small waves. To the south, you can see the rooftops of Alexandria, the canopic way cutting a straight line through the city, the palace gleaming white against the blue of the harbor. The city is a grid of streets and buildings, interspersed with green spaces, gardens and parks that provide relief from the stone and the heat. To the east and west, the coastline curves away, dotted with villages and fields and the dark ribbon of the Nile Delta, a patchwork of green fields and brown canals stretching as far as the eye can see. And here, on the platform where you stand, is the fire. It burns in a great bronze brazier, tended by keepers who feed it wood and oil throughout the night. The wood is imported from Lebanon, great logs of cedar that burn hot and long, and the oil is olive oil, pressed from the fruit of trees grown in the groves of Greece and Asia Minor. The fire is enormous, roaring and crackling, throwing off a heat that is almost unbearable at close range. Behind the fire is the mirror, a massive concave disc of polished bronze, taller than a man and curved with mathematical precision. The mirror is angled to catch and reflect the light, sending it out across the water in a beam that can be seen from the deck of a ship 30 miles away. The effect is achieved through the principle of reflection, the same principle that allows a simple hand mirror to reflect an image. But on this scale, with a mirror this large and a fire this bright, the result is spectacular. At night, the beam of light is visible as a bright line cutting across the darkness, a beacon that guides ships safely into the harbor and warns them away from the rocks and shoals that lie hidden beneath the waves. This is the Pharos, the lighthouse, the first of its kind and the greatest, one of the 7 wonders of the world. The structure was designed by Sostratus of Cnidus, an architect and engineer whose name is recorded in an inscription on the lighthouse itself, though later Ptolemaic kings tried to erase his name and replace it with their own. But Sostratus was clever. He carved his name deep into the stone and then covered it with plaster on which he inscribed the name of the king. Over time the plaster fell away, revealing the original inscription, and Sostratus's name endured. It is a beacon, Yes, a guide for sailors navigating the treacherous shoals and reefs that surround the harbor. But it is more than that. It is a declaration. It says, we are here, we are powerful, we are a light in the darkness, a city that does not hide but proclaims itself to the world. And standing here with the wind in your hair and the fire roaring beside you and the city spread out below, you feel, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what Alexandria represents. It is a dream made real, a vision of what humanity can achieve when it dares to think beyond the boundaries of tribe and tradition, when it builds not for war but for wonder. But a city is not only libraries and lighthouses, it is also the daily life of its people, the rhythms of work and trade and worship that fill the hours and the years. And so let us descend from the lighthouse and walk the streets of Alexandria as an ordinary citizen might have known them. You wake in the early morning, in a modest apartment in one of the residential quarters, the kind of place that housed the tens of thousands of people who were neither kings nor scholars, but who made the city function, merchants and scribes, potters and weavers, bakers and fishermen. Your room is small, with whitewashed walls and a narrow window that lets in the cool morning air. The apartment is part of a larger building, a multi-story structure that houses dozens of families. The buildings in Alexandria are taller than in most ancient cities, often rising 3 or 4 stories, a necessity in a city where space is limited and the population is dense. The construction is brick and wood, with plaster covering the brick, and the buildings are packed closely together, separated by narrow streets and alleys. You dress in a simple tunic and sandals, and you step out into the street. The city is already awake, the sun has just risen, and the light is soft and golden, painting the buildings in shades of amber and rose. The streets are filling with people. There are women carrying baskets of bread and vegetables, heading to the market. The women are dressed in long tunics, often dyed in bright colors, and many of them wear jewelry, simple necklaces and bracelets of copper or bronze. There are children running and shouting, chasing each other between the columns, their voices high and bright. There are slaves, marked by their plain clothing and downcast eyes, carrying water from the public fountains or hauling goods to the warehouses. Slavery is a fact of life in the ancient world, and Alexandria is no exception. Slaves are bought and sold in the markets, and they perform much of the manual labor that keeps the city running. Some slaves are treated well, almost as members of the family, while others are worked brutally and die young. And there are soldiers, members of the Ptolemaic Guard, their armor gleaming, their presence a reminder that this prosperous cosmopolitan city is also a seat of power, a capital. The soldiers are a mix of Greeks and Macedonians, veterans of the wars of the successors or their descendants, and they are loyal to the Ptolemaic dynasty that pays them and grants them land. You make your way to the Agora, the great marketplace, a sprawling complex of stalls and shops that stretches for blocks. The Agora is the commercial heart of the city, the place where goods from all over the known world are bought and sold. The noise is overwhelming. A cacophony of voices haggling and laughing and arguing in a dozen different languages. The smells are just as intense. Fresh fish from the harbor, their scales still gleaming with seawater, laid out on beds of ice or salt. Spices from Arabia and India, pungent and exotic. Their scents so strong they make your eyes water. Fresh bread baking in clay ovens, the scent warm and yeasty. The sharp tang of vinegar and pickled vegetables. The sickly sweet smell of rotting fruit in the heat. The market is a sensory assault, and it takes a moment to adjust. You walk past stalls selling everything imaginable, bolts of linen and wool, dyed in brilliant colors. The linen comes from Egypt, woven from flax grown in the fields of the Delta, and it is the finest in the world, so fine that some fabrics are almost transparent. The wool comes from sheep raised in Greece and Asia Minor, and it is heavier, suitable for cloaks and blankets. Pottery, both the fine red figureware from Greece decorated with scenes from mythology, and the rougher, more practical Egyptian ceramics, plain or decorated with simple geometric patterns. Jewelry, necklaces of gold and carnelian, bracelets set with lapis lazuli, brought from the far mountains of Afghanistan. The lapis is a deep, brilliant blue, prized for its rarity and beauty, and it is worth its weight in silver. Papyrus sold in sheets or already cut and rolled, the paper that makes the library possible, and that Egypt exports to the entire Mediterranean world. Papyrus is made from the pith of a plant that grows in the Nile Delta, and the process of making it is complex. The pith is cut into strips, which are laid out in 2 layers, one horizontal and one vertical. The layers are then pressed together and dried, and the natural sap of the plant glues them into a single sheet. The result is a smooth, durable writing surface that will last for centuries if properly cared for. And everywhere grain, sacks of wheat and barley, the foundation of the city's wealth and power. The sacks are made of coarse cloth, and they are piled high in the market, each one weighing as much as a man can carry. Alexandria is the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, the place where the grain of the Nile is collected and stored and shipped out to feed the cities of the Greek world, and later, the teeming millions of Rome. The grain arrives by barge from the farms upriver, where the annual flood of the Nile deposits fresh silt and makes the land the most fertile on earth. The flood is predictable, arriving in late summer each year, and the Egyptians have learned to work with it, building canals and basins to control the water and to irrigate the fields. When the flood recedes, the farmers plant their crops, and within a few months, the fields are golden with wheat and barley. The harvest is in the spring, and then the grain is brought down the Nile to Alexandria, where it is unloaded at the docks on the lakeside of the city, weighed, taxed and stored in massive granaries, some of them large enough to hold grain for an entire year. The granaries are built of stone, with thick walls and small high windows to keep out the heat and the moisture. Inside, the grain is piled in great heaps, and the air is filled with a dry, dusty smell. And then, when the sailing season begins in the spring, when the winter storms have passed and the Mediterranean is calm, the grain is loaded onto ships, great, lumbering grain freighters that can carry thousands of tons, and sent across the sea to ports in Greece and Italy. These ships are the largest vessels of the ancient world, some of them over 100 feet long, with a single massive sail and a crew of dozens. They are slow and ungainly, but they can carry enough grain to feed a city for months. You stop at a stall selling fruit, and the vendor, an older man with a weathered face and hands stained dark from handling figs, greets you in Greek. He is an Egyptian, but like many in Alexandria, he has learned to speak Greek, the language of commerce and government. You buy a handful of dates, sticky and sweet, and continue on your way, eating as you walk. The dates are fresh, just brought in from the oases of the western desert, and they are delicious, their sweetness cut by a hint of earthiness. The streets are paved with stone, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and the buildings rise on either side, 2 or 3 stories high, their facades decorated with painted frescoes and carved reliefs. The frescoes depict scenes from mythology and daily life, gods and heroes, merchants and farmers, all rendered in bright primary colors that fade in the sun but are still vivid enough to catch the eye. You pass a temple dedicated to Isis, the great Egyptian goddess who has been adopted and adapted by the Greeks, her worship now a blend of traditions. Isis is one of the most popular deities in Alexandria, worshipped by Egyptians and Greeks alike. She is the goddess of magic and motherhood, the protector of sailors and the patron of the dead. Her cult offers the promise of personal salvation, of life after death, and it attracts followers from all walks of life. Incense smoke drifts from the doorway, and you catch a glimpse of worshippers inside, kneeling before her statue, their voices rising in a chant that is ancient and strange and beautiful. The chant is in Egyptian, a language that sounds harsh and guttural to Greek ears, but the melody is haunting. You pass a gymnasium, where young men train their bodies in the Greek manner, wrestling and running and throwing the javelin. The gymnasium is a Greek institution, a place where boys and young men are educated in both physical and intellectual pursuits. In Alexandria, the gymnasium is also a marker of social status. Only the sons of Greek citizens are allowed to train there, and citizenship is jealously guarded, passed down from father to son. The Egyptians, no matter how wealthy or educated, are excluded. You pass a bathhouse, its doors open, steam billowing out into the street, and the sound of laughter and splashing water. The bathhouse is another Greek import, a place of relaxation and socializing. Inside, there are pools of varying temperatures, cold and warm and hot, and rooms where you can be scrubbed and oiled and massaged. The bathhouse is crowded in the afternoons, filled with men who have finished their work for the day and who come here to unwind. This is Alexandria, a city of layers, where the old and the new, the Greek and the Egyptian, the sacred and the profane, exist side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension, but always in motion, always alive. It is a city that never sleeps, where the markets are open from dawn until well after dark, where the docks are busy at all hours, loading and unloading cargo. It is a city of constant noise and movement, of deals being struck and fortunes being made, of ideas being debated and traditions being challenged. And it is a city that, for all its cosmopolitanism, is built on a foundation of inequality. The Greeks and the Macedonians are the ruling class, and they enjoy privileges that the Egyptians do not. But the Egyptians are the majority, and they have their own culture, their own traditions, their own gods. And as the years pass, the tension between these two worlds will grow until it finally erupts in violence and bloodshed. And at the heart of the city's religious life, there is the Serapeum, the great temple of Serapeion. Serapis is a god invented by the Ptolemies, a deliberate creation meant to unite Greek and Egyptian worship. He combines the attributes of Zeus and Osiris, the ruler of the gods and the lord of the underworld, and his cult is one of the most popular in Alexandria. The creation of Serapis is a masterstroke of religious politics. Ptolemy: I wanted a god that both Greeks and Egyptians could worship, a god that would symbolize the unity of his kingdom. Serapis is depicted as a bearded man like Zeus, but he also wears the modius, a grain basket on his head, symbolizing abundance and the fertility of the Nile. His cult combines Greek rituals with Egyptian mysteries, and it attracts followers from both communities. The Serapeum is one of the most magnificent buildings in the city, rivaling even the palace in its grandeur. It stands on a hill, the Acropolis of Alexandria, and you can see it from almost anywhere in the city, its white marble columns gleaming in the sun. You climb the steps leading up to the temple, and as you rise, the city falls away behind you. The steps are steep and numerous, and by the time you reach the top you are breathless, but the view is worth it. From here you can see the entire city spread out below you. The harbor and the palace, the Canopic Way and the markets, the residential quarters and the workshops. The temple itself is vast, a complex of courtyards and halls and sanctuaries. At the center is the statue of Serapis, carved from precious materials, a figure so large and so lifelike that it seems almost to breathe. The statue is made of different materials assembled together: ivory for the skin, gold for the clothing, precious stones for the eyes. The effect is almost hypnotic, and many worshippers report feeling the presence of the god when they stand before the statue. The air inside the temple is cool and filled with the scent of incense, myrrh and frankincense imported from the far south, from the lands of Arabia and the Horn of Africa. The incense is burned in bronze braziers that stand on either side of the statue, and the smoke rises in slow, curling columns, filling the hall with a haze that softens the light and adds to the sense of mystery. Priests move quietly through the shadows, their white robes rustling, their voices low as they perform the rituals of the day. The priests are members of a hereditary caste, and their position is passed down from father to son. They are trained in the ancient rituals, in the proper way to approach the gods, and they are the intermediaries between the human and the divine. You leave an offering, a small coin, or a handful of incense, and you stand for a moment in the presence of the god, feeling the weight of centuries, the sense that this place, this city, is connected to something larger and older than yourself. The Serapeum is also home to a library, a daughter library to the Great Library, a collection of scrolls that is said to number in the tens of thousands. This library is more specialized than the Great Library, focusing on religious and philosophical texts, and it attracts a different kind of scholar, men who are interested in the mysteries of the soul and the nature of the divine. It is here, in the quiet halls of the temple, that many scholars prefer to work, away from the bustle of the Malshan, in a space that feels more sacred, more removed from the world. The scrolls here cover every subject: philosophy and theology, history and medicine, poetry and magic. There are texts on astrology, the belief that the movements of the stars and planets influence human affairs. There are texts on alchemy, the search for the secret of transforming base metals into gold. There are texts on the mysteries of Isis and Osiris, the ancient Egyptian gods who promise life after death to their followers. You spend an afternoon here reading a text on the movements of the stars, a treatise written by an Egyptian astronomer centuries ago and translated into Greek. The language is dense, the arguments complex, but the ideas are fascinating. A vision of the cosmos as a great machine, orderly and predictable, governed by laws that can be understood and described. The Egyptians have been observing the stars for thousands of years, and they have accumulated a vast body of knowledge about the heavens. They know the cycles of the planets, the positions of the constellations, the times of the solstices and equinoxes. They have developed a calendar based on the annual flood of the Nile and the rising of the star Sirius, and this calendar is remarkably accurate, differing from the true solar year by only a fraction of a day. As the sun begins to set, you leave the Serapeum and make your way back down into the city. The steps are easier going down than they were going up, and you take your time, pausing occasionally to look back at the temple, its columns glowing in the light of the setting sun. The streets are quieter now, the heat of the day fading into the cool of evening. Lamps are being lit, small oil flames flickering in windows and doorways. The smell of cooking fills the air, onions and garlic, roasted meat, fresh bread. The Alexandrians eat their main meal in the evening, after the heat of the day has passed, and the smell of cooking is everywhere. You find a small tavern, a modest place with rough wooden tables and a clay oven in the corner, and you order a simple meal, bread and cheese, a bowl of lentil stew, a cup of watered wine. The stew is thick and hearty, flavored with cumin and coriander, and the bread is warm, just out of the oven. The other patrons are workers like yourself, men and women who have spent the day in the markets or the docks or the workshops. They talk and laugh, their voices rising and falling in the warm, smoky air. The conversation is in Greek, but occasionally you hear words in Egyptian or Aramaic, the languages of home and family, and for a moment you are not thinking about libraries or kings or the fate of empires. You are simply here, in this place, at this time, alive and part of the great, messy, beautiful human story that is Alexandria. But Alexandria is not only a city of scholars and merchants, it is also a city of power, a royal capital. And nowhere is that power more visible than in the palace quarter. The palaces of the Ptolemies occupy a vast area along the waterfront, a complex of buildings and gardens and courtyards that is said to cover nearly a third of the city. It is a city within a city, walled off from the common people, accessible only to the royal family, their advisors, and their guests. The walls are high and guarded by soldiers, and ordinary citizens are not allowed to enter without permission. Inside, the world is completely different. The streets are wider, the buildings grander, the gardens more elaborate. There are fountains and pools, statues and mosaics, rooms filled with treasures from every corner of the known world. And it is here, in these marble halls, that the fate of Egypt and much of the Eastern Mediterranean is decided. Imagine now that it is the 1st century before the Common Era, and the ruler of Egypt is Cleopatra VII, the last of the Ptolemies, a woman whose intelligence and charisma have made her one of the most famous figures in history. You are a visitor to the palace, perhaps a diplomat from Rome, or a scholar invited to dine with the queen, and you have been granted an audience. You are led through corridors lined with columns, past rooms filled with treasures, gold and ivory, tapestries from Persia, statues from Greece, carved furniture inlaid with precious stones. The walls are painted with scenes of gods and kings, vibrant reds and blues and golds that seem to glow in the lamplight. The paintings depict the Ptolemies as pharaohs, wearing the traditional crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, making offerings to the gods, conquering their enemies. And then you are brought into the presence of Cleopatra herself. She is seated on a throne at the far end of a long hall, surrounded by attendants and advisors. The room is large and high-ceilinged, designed to impress and to intimidate. The throne is made of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and carnelian, and it sits on a raised platform so that Cleopatra looks down on all who enter. The room is filled with the scent of incense and perfume, heavy and intoxicating. The perfume is made from flowers and spices, myrrh and frankincense, rose and jasmine, and it is so strong that it makes your head swim. Cleopatra is not classically beautiful, or so the historians will later say, but she is striking, her gaze intelligent and direct, her voice clear and commanding. She is dressed in the Egyptian style, wearing a long pleated gown of the finest linen, almost transparent, with a broad collar of gold and lapis. On her head, she wears the uraeus, the cobra symbol of Egyptian royalty. But her face is Greek, her features refined, her expression alert and calculating. She speaks to you in Greek, though you know she is fluent in many languages, including Egyptian, a rarity among the Ptolemies, who have ruled Egypt for 3 centuries, without bothering to learn the language of their subjects. Cleopatra is different. She has studied Egyptian language and religion. She participates in Egyptian rituals. She presents herself as a true pharaoh. the living incarnation of Isis. This is not mere propaganda. It is a calculated political strategy, an attempt to win the loyalty of her Egyptian subjects, and to distinguish herself from her predecessors. She asks you questions about your homeland, about the politics of Rome, about the state of the world beyond Alexandria. And as you answer, you realize that this is not mere politeness. She is gathering information, assessing, calculating. Cleopatra is a survivor, a woman ruling in a world dominated by men, a queen of a kingdom that is increasingly at the mercy of the rising power of Rome. She has already aligned herself with Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, bearing him a son, Caesaron, whom she will claim is the rightful heir to both Egypt and Rome. The relationship with Caesar was both personal and political. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria in pursuit of his rival Pompey, he found a city embroiled in a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother husband Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra had herself smuggled into the palace, rolled up in a carpet or a linen sack, and presented herself to Caesar. It was a daring and theatrical move, and it worked. Caesar was captivated, and he used his military power to place Cleopatra on the throne. Together they spent several months in Alexandria, and their relationship scandalized Roman society. And now, after Caesar's assassination, she has thrown her lot in with Mark Antony, one of the most powerful men in the Roman world, one of the triumvirs who ruled the Republic. Her palace is a stage, and she is the lead actor, playing a role that requires both brilliance and ruthlessness. You are dismissed, and as you leave, you catch a glimpse of the royal barge, moored at the private dock. It is a floating palace, gilded and hung with silk, a vessel meant to impress and intimidate. The barge is enormous, over 100 feet long, with multiple decks and cabins, decorated with carvings and paintings. It is on this barge that Cleopatra famously met Antony, sailing up the Nile in a spectacle so magnificent that it passed into legend. The oars were silver, the sails were purple, dyed with the precious Tyrian purple that only royalty could afford, and she herself reclined beneath a canopy of gold, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, surrounded by attendants costumed as nymphs and sea creatures. Musicians played flutes and lyres, and the air was filled with the scent of incense. It was theater, propaganda, seduction, all rolled into one, and it worked. Antony was captivated, and their alliance would shape the final years of Cleopatra's reign and the final chapter of Alexandria's independence. But that alliance would also lead to disaster. Antony's rival, Octavian, the adopted son and heir of Julius Caesar, will prove to be a more formidable opponent than Cleopatra anticipated. Octavian was not swayed by spectacle or seduction. He was cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. He waged a propaganda war against Antony and Cleopatra, portraying them as decadent, foreign, un-Roman. He claimed that Antony had been bewitched by an Egyptian sorceress, that he had abandoned his Roman wife and children, that he planned to move the capital of the empire to Alexandria and make Cleopatra the queen of the world. The propaganda worked. Public opinion in Rome turned against Antony, and when Octavian finally declared war, he did so not against Antony but against Cleopatra, framing the conflict as a war to save Rome from foreign domination. The two fleets met at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, and the result was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Their fleet was destroyed, and they fled back to Alexandria. Octavian followed, and within a year he was at the gates of the city. Antony, believing that Cleopatra had already committed suicide, fell on his own sword. Cleopatra, trapped in her palace with no hope of escape, chose her own death rather than be paraded through the streets of Rome as a captive. She died from the bite of an asp, a venomous snake according to the legend, though modern scholars think she may have taken poison. Both Antony and Cleopatra would be dead, suicides in the face of inevitable defeat within a year. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son, was hunted down and killed by Octavian's agents, eliminating any potential rival for power. Egypt would become a province of Rome, and Alexandria, though still a great city, would no longer be a capital. The palaces would be occupied by Roman governors, and the wealth of the Nile would flow not to the Ptolemies but to the emperors in Rome. And yet, even under Roman rule, Alexandria would retain its unique character. It would remain the intellectual center of the Mediterranean, the home of the library and the museum, the place where scholars came to study and debate and push the boundaries of human knowledge. It would remain a cosmopolitan metropolis, a city where cultures met and mingled, where Greek and Egyptian and Jewish and Roman traditions blended into something new and distinctive. The Romans valued Alexandria for its wealth and its strategic position, and they invested in its infrastructure, building new temples and aqueducts, expanding the harbor. But they also viewed it with suspicion. Alexandria was a city with a long tradition of independence and rebellion, and the Romans knew that it could be a source of trouble. They stationed a legion in the city, and they kept a close eye on the local population, ready to suppress any signs of unrest. But Alexandria would also become a city of increasing tension, as the old certainties began to crumble and new forces, new ideas began to take hold. The Roman Empire was undergoing its own transformation, and the changes would eventually reach Alexandria, with profound and sometimes tragic consequences. One of those new ideas was Christianity. In the first centuries of the Common Era, a new religion began to spread across the Roman Empire, a faith that rejected the old gods and proclaimed a single, all-powerful deity and a savior who had died and risen from the dead. In Alexandria, Christianity found fertile ground. The city's large Jewish population provided a bridge between the monotheism of Judaism and the new Christian message. According to Christian tradition, the Gospel of Mark was written in Alexandria, and the city became one of the first centers of Christian learning. The Catechetical School of Alexandria, founded in the late 2nd century, was one of the most important institutions of early Christian theology, producing scholars like Clement and Origen who would shape the development of Christian doctrine for centuries. The city's tradition of philosophical debate made it a natural center for early Christian theology. Christian thinkers in Alexandria engaged with Greek philosophy, trying to reconcile the teachings of Christ with the ideas of Plato and Aristotle. They developed complex theories about the nature of God, the relationship between the Father and the Son, the nature of Christ's divinity and humanity. These were not abstract debates. They were questions that went to the very heart of what it meant to be a Christian, and the answers that were developed in Alexandria would shape the Christian church for all time. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, Alexandria was home to one of the most important Christian communities in the world, led by powerful bishops who would shape the development of Christian doctrine. The bishops of Alexandria were second only to the Bishop of Rome in terms of influence and prestige, and they played a crucial role in the great theological controversies that racked the early church. But the rise of Christianity also brought conflict. The old pagan traditions, which had coexisted relatively peacefully for centuries, were now under attack. Christian mobs, encouraged by zealous bishops, and sometimes by imperial decrees, began to target pagan temples, destroying statues, burning books, and driving out the priests and worshippers. The conflict was not just religious, but also political and social. The Christians were often from the lower classes, while the pagans were often from the educated elite. The Christians saw the pagan temples as symbols of oppression and superstition, while the pagans saw the Christians as ignorant fanatics who were destroying centuries of tradition and culture. And nowhere was this conflict more visible or more tragic than in the destruction of the Serapeum. It is the year 391 of the Common Era, and the Roman Emperor Theodosius I has issued a series of decrees banning pagan worship and ordering the closure of temples throughout the empire. Theodosius is a devout Christian, and he is determined to make the empire Christian as well. He has banned pagan sacrifices, closed pagan temples, and forbidden the worship of the old gods. In Alexandria, the Christian patriarch Theophilus seizes the opportunity. Theophilus is a powerful and ambitious man, determined to assert the dominance of Christianity in the city. He gathers a mob, and they march on the Serapeum, the great temple of Serapis that has stood on the hill for over 600 years. The mob is made up of Christians from all walks of life, monks from the desert monasteries, laborers from the docks, merchants from the markets. They are armed with clubs and torches, and they are filled with righteous fury. Inside the temple, the priests and a handful of pagan defenders barricade themselves, knowing that they cannot win but determined to make a stand. For days they hold out, defending the temple against the mob outside. Food and water run low and the situation becomes desperate. The pagans send messages to the imperial governor, begging for protection, but the governor is a Christian, and he does not intervene. Finally, the emperor sends word that the temple must be surrendered. The priests have no choice. The doors are opened and the mob pours in. What follows is an orgy of destruction. The great statue of Serapis, which has stood at the heart of the temple for centuries, is hacked to pieces. The marble columns are toppled, crashing to the ground with a sound like thunder. The carvings and frescoes are defaced, chiseled off the walls or covered with plaster. The bronze doors are torn from their hinges, the gold leaf stripped from the ceilings, and the library, the daughter library with its tens of thousands of scrolls, is ransacked. Some scrolls are burned on the spot, fed into bonfires that rage in the courtyards. Others are carried away, scattered across the city, lost or destroyed in the chaos. In a matter of days, centuries of accumulated knowledge and tradition are wiped out, not by a foreign invader, but by the city's own people, driven by religious fervor and the conviction that the old ways were not just wrong but dangerous, a threat to the soul. The destruction of the Serapis is not the end of pagan Alexandria, but it is a turning point. It marks the beginning of a new era, one in which the old cosmopolitan tolerance is replaced by a new certainty, a belief that there is only one truth and that all others must be suppressed. The pagans who remain in Alexandria after the destruction of the Serapeum are increasingly marginalized. They are forbidden to hold public office, to teach in the schools, to perform their rituals. Some convert to Christianity, either out of genuine conviction or out of a desire to avoid persecution. Others continue to practice their religion in secret, meeting in private homes, preserving the old traditions as best they can. Among the most famous victims of this new intolerance is Hypatia, a philosopher and mathematician who taught in Alexandria in the early 5th century. Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a mathematician and astronomer who worked in the museum, and she inherited his love of learning. She was one of the few women in the ancient world to achieve prominence as a scholar, and she was renowned for her intelligence and her eloquence. She taught mathematics and philosophy, and her lectures attracted students from all over the Mediterranean. But Hypatia was also a pagan, and in the increasingly Christian city of Alexandria, this made her a target. In 415 CE, she was attacked by a mob of Christian zealots, dragged from her chariot, and murdered. Her body was torn apart, and her remains were burned. The murder of Hypatia was a shocking act of violence, and it sent a clear message: there was no place in Christian Alexandria for those who clung to the old ways. The death of Hypatia is often cited as a symbol of the end of the ancient world, the moment when the light of reason was extinguished by the darkness of religious fanaticism. But this is an oversimplification. The reality is more complex. Christianity in Alexandria was not monolithic. There were Christians who condemned the violence, who argued for tolerance and for the preservation of ancient learning. And there were pagans who were intolerant and violent, who attacked Christians and destroyed their churches. The conflict was not simply between reason and superstition, but between different visions of what the world should be. And what of the Great Library? The question of when and how the Library of Alexandria was destroyed is one of the most debated and misunderstood topics in all of ancient history. There is no single catastrophic event that can be pointed to, no day when the library burned and the knowledge of the ancient world was lost. Instead, the library seems to have died slowly, a victim of neglect, political instability, and changing priorities. The most famous story, repeated in countless books and documentaries, is that Julius Caesar accidentally burned the library during his military campaign in Alexandria in 48 BCE. The story goes that Caesar, besieged in the palace quarter by the forces of Ptolemy XIII, set fire to the enemy fleet in the harbor to prevent it from being used against him. The fire spread out of control, reaching the docks and the warehouses where books were stored for export. According to some ancient sources, a large number of scrolls were destroyed in this fire. But this story, while dramatic, is almost certainly false, at least as far as the main library is concerned. The ancient sources that mention the fire describe it as limited to the docks and to a warehouse where books were stored for export, not to the main library itself. The library located inland near the palace was most likely untouched. The Roman historian Livy mentions the fire, but he says that it destroyed warehouses on the docks, not the library. The geographer Strabo, who visited Alexandria shortly after Caesar's campaign, makes no mention of the library being damaged. So if Caesar did not burn the library, what happened to it? A more plausible explanation is that the library declined gradually over the centuries, its funding cut as Egypt's wealth drained away to Rome, its staff reduced, its collections neglected. Under the Roman Empire, Alexandria remained an important city, but it was no longer a capital. The wealth of Egypt flowed to Rome, not to the Ptolemaic court, and the resources that had once supported the library and the museum were no longer available. The museum continued to function for several more centuries, but it was a shadow of its former self. The scholars who worked there were fewer in number, and their work was less innovative. By the 4th century, when the Serapeum was destroyed, the great library may have already been a shadow of its former self, its shelves half empty, its scholars departed, its mission forgotten. The destruction of the Serapeum in 391 CE destroyed the daughter library, with its tens of thousands of scrolls, but the fate of the main library is less clear. Some scholars believe that it was destroyed in the same period, caught up in the religious violence that was tearing the city apart. Others believe that it survived into the 5th or even the 6th century, slowly declining until it finally ceased to exist. And then in the centuries that followed, whatever remained was lost to time, to fire, to decay, to the simple fact that papyrus is fragile and that without constant care, it crumbles into dust. There is a final story, often told, that the library was burned by invading Arab armies in the 7th century. According to this legend, the Arab general Amr bin al-As asked the Caliph Omar what to do with the books he had found in Alexandria. Omar supposedly replied that if the books agreed with the Quran, they were unnecessary, and if they disagreed, they were heretical, so either way, they should be burned. The scrolls were then used as fuel to heat the baths of Alexandria, and it took 6 months to burn them all. This story, like the story of Caesar's fire, is almost certainly a myth, invented centuries later to discredit Islam and to explain the loss of the library in a way that fit medieval prejudices. The truth is far more mundane and far more tragic. The library died not in a blaze of glory, but quietly, forgotten, a victim of indifference and the inexorable passage of time. The loss of the library is not the loss of a single building or a single collection of books. It is the loss of an idea. The idea that all knowledge can be gathered in one place, that the pursuit of truth transcends borders and cultures, that learning is a shared human endeavor. And yet, even in death, the library casts a long shadow. The idea of the library, the vision of a place where all knowledge is gathered and preserved, has inspired countless later efforts, from the great libraries of the Islamic world, like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, to the public libraries of the modern age. The dream of Alexandria did not die. It was reborn again and again, in every culture and every age that valued learning and believed that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded, that the pursuit of truth is a common human endeavor that transcends borders and time. The Library of Alexandria may be gone, but its legacy lives on in every library in the world, in every scholar who dedicates their life to the pursuit of knowledge, in every person who believes that learning is valuable for its own sake. And what of Alexandria itself? The city did not vanish with the library or the fall of the Ptolemies. It endured through Roman rule and Byzantine rule, through Arab conquest and Ottoman occupation, through earthquakes and plagues and wars. But the city that exists today is not the city of the ancients. Much of ancient Alexandria lies beneath the waves, drowned by earthquakes and rising sea levels over the centuries. The ancient city was built on a narrow strip of land, and over time that land has subsided and the sea has risen. The royal palaces, the great lighthouse, the docks and warehouses, all of it is underwater now, scattered across the floor of the harbor, waiting for archaeologists to bring it back to light. The lighthouse, the Great Pharos, stood for over 1,000 years, surviving earthquakes and storms, a beacon for ships entering the harbor. But in the 14th century, a series of powerful earthquakes finally brought it down. The stones were later used by the Sultan Qaitbay to build a fortress on the same site, and that fortress still stands today, a reminder of what once was. In recent decades, underwater excavations have revealed astonishing finds: massive stone blocks from the lighthouse, some of them weighing dozens of tons, statues of Ptolemaic kings and queens, larger than life, their features still sharp despite centuries beneath the sea, columns and capitals, and inscribed stones that once lined the royal quarter. These artifacts, pulled from the sea and placed in museums, are all that remain of a world that once seemed eternal. The work of underwater archaeology in Alexandria is difficult and dangerous. The water is murky, visibility is poor, and the harbor is still in use, with ships passing overhead. But the archaeologists persist, diving again and again, mapping the underwater ruins, recovering artifacts, piecing together the layout of the ancient city. On land too, fragments survive. The catacombs of Kom el Shukafah, a vast underground necropolis dating to the 2nd century CE, are a stunning blend of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman styles, a final expression of Alexandria's cosmopolitan character. The catacombs were discovered by accident in 1900 when a donkey fell through a shaft and revealed the entrance. Inside, the walls are decorated with reliefs that show Egyptian gods dressed in Roman armor, a fusion of styles that is uniquely Alexandrian. Pompey's Pillar, a massive red granite column standing nearly 100 feet tall, is one of the largest monolithic columns in the world, erected in the 4th century to honor the Emperor Diocletian. The column stands alone now, a solitary monument in a landscape of modern buildings, but it was once part of a larger temple complex. And scattered throughout the modern city are smaller remnants, broken statues, inscribed stones, fragments of mosaics, each one a small window into the past. In 2002, a new library was opened in Alexandria, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a modern attempt to revive the spirit of the ancient library. The building is a striking piece of modern architecture, a massive circular structure covered in glass and aluminum, designed to evoke the sun rising over the Mediterranean. Inside, it houses millions of books and documents, a research center, a planetarium, and museums. It is not a replacement for the ancient library, but it is a tribute to it, a statement that the dream of Alexandria, the dream of gathering and preserving knowledge, is still alive. But perhaps the most important legacy of Alexandria is not physical, but intellectual. The scholars who worked in the library and the museum laid the foundations for much of Western science and philosophy. Euclid's Elements is still studied by students of mathematics, and the geometric principles he laid out over 2,000 years ago are still taught in schools around the world. The astronomical observations made in Alexandria by scholars like Aristarchus and Hipparchus and Ptolemy informed the work of later scientists for over 1,000 years. Ptolemy's Almagest, written in Alexandria in the 2nd century CE, was the definitive work on astronomy until the Copernican revolution. The medical texts preserved and expanded by Alexandrian physicians, building on the work of Hippocrates, shaped the practice of medicine well into the modern era. Galen, a physician who studied in Alexandria, wrote extensively on anatomy and physiology, and his works were the standard medical texts in Europe for over 1,000 years. And the tradition of critical scholarship, of collecting and comparing and questioning texts, is a direct inheritance from the scholars who worked in the shadow of the lighthouse. The Alexandrian scholars developed the principles of textual criticism, the methods for determining which version of a text is the most accurate, for identifying interpolations and corruptions. These methods are still used by scholars today. In a very real sense, the modern world is built on the foundations laid in Alexandria. The city taught us that knowledge is cumulative, that it can be preserved and passed on, that the work of one generation can build on the work of the last. It taught us that diversity is a strength, that the best ideas come from the collision and blending of different cultures and traditions. And it taught us that the pursuit of knowledge is not a luxury but a necessity, a fundamental part of what it means to be human. And so, as the sun sets over the modern city of Alexandria, you stand once more at the edge of the sea where this journey began. The water is calm, reflecting the last light of the day in shades of gold and rose and deep, deep blue. The modern city behind you is a sprawl of concrete and glass, a metropolis of millions. But here, at the water's edge, you can almost forget the present and imagine the past. Out there, beneath the waves, the ancient harbor sleeps. The palaces and the lighthouse, the docks and the warehouses, all of it is still there, buried in sand and silt, waiting. Divers have mapped the ruins, have brought up statues and columns and inscribed stones, but most of it remains hidden, a ghost city beneath the sea. You think of the scholars in the library, bent over their scrolls, their eyes straining in the lamplight, copying and cataloging and debating, driven by the conviction that what they were doing mattered, that knowledge was worth preserving, that the effort to understand the world was the highest and most noble of human pursuits. You think of Euclid, patiently explaining a geometric proof to a student. You think of Eratosthenes, measuring the shadow of the sun and calculating the size of the earth. You think of the anonymous scribes, copying scroll after scroll, preserving the words of Homer and Sophocles and Aristotle for future generations. You think of the sailors guiding their ships into the harbor, watching for the light of the Pharos, knowing that they were arriving at the greatest city in the world, a place where anything seemed possible. You think of the merchants in the markets, haggling over the price of spices and silk, their voices rising and falling in a dozen languages. You think of the priests in the Serapeum, performing rituals that had been performed for centuries, connecting the present to the deep past. You think of Cleopatra, standing on her barge, sailing up the Nile in a blaze of gold and purple, playing her part in the great drama of history, knowing that her world was ending but determined to shape that ending on her own terms. And you think of the anonymous millions, the bakers and potters, the scribes and fishermen, the weavers and laborers, the people who lived and worked and loved and died in this city, whose names are lost but whose lives, collectively, made Alexandria what it was. They built the city, stone by stone. They fed it with the grain of the Nile. They filled it with life and noise and motion. And when the city changed, when the old certainties crumbled and new ideas took hold, they adapted, or they resisted, or they fled. But they were always there. The human heartbeat of the city, the real Alexandria. The city that fed an empire is gone, but its echoes remain. In the libraries we build, in the knowledge we preserve, in the cosmopolitan ideals we strive for, Alexandria lives on. It lives in the belief that learning is sacred, that diversity enriches, that the pursuit of truth is worth the effort, no matter the cost. It lives in the quiet moments when we open a book and feel ourselves connected to the past, part of a great chain of human curiosity and wonder that stretches back across the centuries to a city on the edge of the sea, a city that dreamed of gathering all the world's knowledge in one place, and for a brief and shining moment, almost succeeded. The dream was never fully realized. No dream ever is. But the effort, the ambition, the sheer audacity of it, that is what matters. Alexandria dared to imagine a world where knowledge was more valuable than gold, where the life of the mind was the highest calling, where people from every corner of the earth could come together and learn from each other, and for a few hundred years, that dream was real. And so our journey through Alexandria comes to an end. The lighthouse is dark, the library is silent, the palace is drowned beneath the waves, but the spirit of the city, the dream that inspired it, endures. It endures in every library, in every scholar, in every person who believes that knowledge is worth pursuing and that the world is richer for the diversity of its voices. It endures in the idea that we are all connected, that the work of the past can inform the present, that learning is a shared human endeavor that transcends time and space. Thank you for walking these ancient streets with me, for standing in the presence of the great minds who once called this city home, for imagining, if only for a moment, what it was like to live in the city that fed an empire. The past is gone, but it is not lost. It lives in memory, in ruins, in the stories we tell. It lives in the underwater ruins of the harbor, waiting to be explored. It lives in the fragments scattered across the modern city, waiting to be pieced together. And it lives in the idea of the library, the dream of gathering all knowledge in one place, a dream that continues to inspire us even now. Tonight, as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, may you dream of marble columns and papyrus scrolls, of the scent of incense and the sound of waves against the shore, of a city that was for 1,000 years the light of the world. May you dream of the lighthouse, its fire burning against the night, a beacon for ships and a symbol of human aspiration. May you dream of the scholars, bent over their work, preserving the knowledge of the ages. May you dream of the markets, filled with the goods of the world, the voices of 100 languages. May you dream of the gardens and the fountains, the temples and the palaces, the daily life of a city that brought together the best of many worlds. Sleep well, and rest in the knowledge that the work of Alexandria, the great project of understanding and preserving and sharing the knowledge of the world, continues, even now, in ways the ancient scholars could never have imagined. Until our next journey into the past, good night, and may your dreams be filled with the wonder of distant ages.